In an emergency, we have checklists. But what happens after you kill the mags? We're talking emergency aftermath in the hangar. Hello, I'm Dan Milliken, and welcome to In the Hangar, sponsored by our friends at Wingfield Aviation for your aircraft maintenance needs. Well, we're here talking about what happens immediately after you shut down the mags on the runway or the taxiway when you've had some sort of an emergency. Maybe it's a big emergency, maybe it's a minor emergency. But we've got some really cool guys here to talk about exactly what happens. And so let's introduce yourself. So Ernie, I appreciate you coming. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I've only been flying about 4 years, but I had a couple hundred hours when the incident occurred.
Okay, and then we're going to talk about that. Sitting right here, we have Matt Wells, Tower Controller Extraordinaire. Matt.
What's up? Thanks for having me back.
All right, and then right here, Larry Johnson. Larry, thanks for coming. Larry, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm aircraft fire certified, rescue certified, Grand Prairie Fire Department, 27 years. Had about 10 years at Grand Prairie Municipal Airport, and had multiple training sessions at DFW with their training and operations.
Wow, okay, very cool. So we've got really good coverage here on what we do at the airport immediately after an emergency. So first off, you kind of brought this topic to me because of your incident. So let's talk about, first of all, tell me kind of what you think are some of the different emergencies that would be relative to what we're talking.
Anything that gives you an AOG on a runway at an uncontrolled airport.
An AOG?
Airplane on ground.
Okay, airplane on ground, all right.
So it's incapacitated on the runway.
Okay. And so that would be anything from a tire blown out to, engine failure or even fire.
Right.
Okay. All right, let's go into your story. What happened?
So I'm practicing because I've just transitioned to a different aircraft, doing lots of laps in the pattern. About the 8th time I decided I'd catch some food and go home. Upon landing, the aircraft I'm flying doesn't have direct control of the nose wheel. You do it with the rudder and brakes, and all of a sudden it starts going to the left.
What aircraft were you flying?
A Columbia 400. So I'm thinking I have a locked brake. And so I'm trying to use the other brake and pull the power so I control the aircraft. And just before the edge of the runway, 3/4 of the way down, I bring it to a stop. So I'm concerned about heat, fire, but I get out and there's a flat tire.
Okay.
So I'm at an uncontrolled airport, approaching dark, no mechanic on site or on field, and I'm blocking the only runway that has lights for night.
What airport?
Hope, Arkansas, Mike 18.
What did you do?
Well, first I sat there and thought, what can I do? Can you pull it off? They have a four-wheeler, but it has the things around the wheels, and those came to rest on the concrete. So I couldn't move the aircraft. So I thought, well, I'll call Fort Worth Center and tell them to tell people, don't let anybody land here, put a NOTAM out. And I got, first off, trying to contact them. Back in 2017, they didn't post the numbers.
Do they now?
Yes, on ForeFlight, because that's how you pick up your clearance.
Right.
But they didn't then. And I couldn't find the number, so then I called 1-800-WX-BRIEF. They wouldn't give me the number.
Really?
No. But they patched me through eventually. And they said, ARTC, Fort Worth Center said, you're not the airport manager. We can't post a NOTAM, and we can't close a runway.
Wow. Matt, is that accurate?
That's somewhat accurate, yeah. The manager, airport manager, or operations, in the case of Meacham, they're the ones that control, they own the runway, so they can put out the NOTAMs for it and stuff. And the tower, we don't really put out NOTAMs. We have to coordinate with them for that. So at an uncontrolled field, yeah, airport manager or operations officer or something like that.
So what did you do?
So then I started thinking, gee, there's all kinds of liability here leaving an aircraft on a runway at night. So I started calling people. Fort Worth Center at least gave me the phone number for the airport manager,
yeah.
But 5 o'clock at night, after he doesn't answer, doesn't recognize the phone number. I had fortunately met some people at that field before, so I started texting all these people and calling them. And eventually, they had the phone number for his house, got a hold of the guy, and he came out. So they actually had, believe it or not, an uncontrolled airport. They had the big yellow X's that were actually made of plastic, giant things that we spread out at each end of the runway. And then he put a note about and put orange cones around the aircraft.
Okay. So, and how long from when you touched down to where he came out and was able to officially close the runway?
At least 3 hours.
3 hours. So did anybody come in during that time?
No, fortunately, for other reasons, I had a portable radio because I couldn't sit in the aircraft.
Oh, so at least you could listen to anybody
Yes.
coming in CTAF, but
Yes.
Unfortunately, nobody came in Nordo.
Right.
Okay. All right. So, Matt, that's an uncontrolled field. At your tower controlled field that you control, in a situation with a flat tire or something more on the minor level, what is the procedure?
So what I do is, if I actually had one not too long ago, had a Cherokee come in, kind of landed hard and disabled my runway. We in the tower cannot close a runway.
Oh, really?
We cannot. We can suspend operations to it, which is what we do. All it really is saying I'm not sending anyone to that runway. We can't NOTAM close it. We can't do any of that stuff. The first thing we do is we call ops and we say, hey, disabled aircraft, get a tow. Call the flight school if applicable. And we just run all of our checklists, and assuming the airplanes that are still coming can take the smaller runway 1735, 4,000 feet, we can put them on that. Past that, it's I call approach control, hey, don't send me anybody else. Main runway's closed or suspended.
Suspended.
Right. And so they'll hold them out, and as long as they want. And we had that happen when it happened about a month or so ago. Cherokee was stuck on the runway. It was about 30 minutes. That was a little bit slower response time. They're normally really quick to get out there and get those guys at least off the runway. And we had some guys holding in the run-up area. They had to wait forever. We were calling everyone we could in the tower, and at the end it was just we had to just sit there and watch. And then I had a Learjet that was like, hey, when's the runway opening? As soon as ops gets out there. We can't do anything about it. It's suspended. Well, is there a NOTAM? No, well, not that I know about. If there was a NOTAM issued, and they didn't tell us. But I said, hey, I have a small runway. I don't know if we want to do that or not. 5 minutes later, he came in and landed.
Okay.
A Learjet on my small runway. It was just fine. So
Okay.
it's good to have two runways.
Interesting, you mentioned tow. I found out they're basically wheelchairs for airplanes. In my condition, if I had been at a bigger airport, they have a jack that has wheels that just props that up and pull it off.
So they can. Your ops team can pretty much pull any type of aircraft off.
I believe they are capable, not any type, I mean, the bigger airplanes probably not, but the smaller Cherokees and stuff, yeah, I think they have something similar to that where they can just move it so they can get ops going.
You mentioned that you and the tower cannot close or NOTAM a runway. Who does?
It's airport ops, since they own the
Oh,
runways.
so ops.
Airport operations, they own the field, they own the runways, we just control
You own the
it.
airspace.
We own the airspace, and we control the runways. They own it, so if we're just randomly out of nowhere, they're like, hey, we're closing this runway, and we're NOTAM closing it out of nowhere, well, that'll get some people stirring, and our boss will call theirs, but it's their
But
runway.
that's what they can do.
It's their runway, yeah.
Okay, Larry, you worked. I guess you trained at some at DFW. You worked Grand Prairie quite a bit. Were you guys ever called out on some of these type of disabled aircraft?
Yeah, we worked quite a few standbys, and then there were some accidents. Most of the accidents actually were on approach that I'm aware of. But yeah, we worked quite a few standbys, which would be basically roll the fire apparatus out onto the taxiway and position at departure, arrival, and midfield.
I'm guessing Grand Prairie, because I did my instrument training there. There's probably not a whole bunch of activity.
Surprisingly enough, it's gotten pretty busy over there now.
Okay. You mentioned standby. What do you mean?
Well, we work off an alert basis,
Okay.
alert 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Alert 1, excuse me. Alert 1 would be that, hey, there's a problem here, but the aircraft is probably going to be able to land okay. Number two would be there's potential smoke. There's instrumentation saying that there's potentially smoke or fire on board the aircraft, stuck landing gear, things that maybe the aircraft is not going to land safely.
Okay.
And alert three would actually be a crash on or off the airport. So when you roll an aircraft, you don't know. When you roll on an aircraft, you really don't know where this aircraft is going to come down. So that's why you position at 3 different locations.
Okay, that's good. That clears that up. Now let me go to either one of you two. We talked about uncontrolled, we talked about controlled. But what happens when, like Grand Prairie, the tower shuts down at 8 p.m.? What happens at 9 p.m.?
Becomes uncontrolled again.
I know, but if I were to come into Grand Prairie and have your situation, a flat tire, and I'm now obstructing the runway, who am I calling?
It goes back to my scenario. It's an uncontrolled airport.
So the airport
Call
manager.
the ops, probably.
But is ops 24 hours even if the tower's not?
Well, it meets them, the tower's 24.
Yeah, right.
And ops is
So
24.
what about, did your ops at Grand Prairie, were they around there all the time, or did they have the same hours as tower?
No, tower was uncontrolled at night.
But ops, were they there?
No.
Okay, so everybody went home. So now you're just calling whoever's on the facility directory.
911, essentially, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the tower, you guys and ARFF, you guys want to do practices anyway, right? Or
It's something that I've been trying to have my bosses and higher ups entertain, because in the military, when I was at Tyndall, we did exercises all the time. And one of the biggest things we found with doing those exercises, at least at a military base, is that the ambulances and the fire guys, on some days, their response time was not good.
Okay.
So an ambulance responding 30 minutes after we call them is not good, you know what I mean? So we did these exercises in the military, and that response time was, and then whenever we had an emergency, the fire guys, they were stationed all over the place, and then aircraft landed, boom, they're right there ready to go. Don't do that really much at Meacham, which is why, like I said, I'm trying to get them to entertain that, so we can have pilots just simulate things like
Right.
in Dan's recent video.
Right, Dan Grider.
That would be awesome.
well, I want to talk to you guys about that because I'd like to do something like that. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, but I would love to do something similar to that.
Larry, did you guys ever do practices?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're required by the federal government, the FAA, to go through operational proficiency drills on an annual and then a 3-year basis for a major catastrophe. But getting back to the alert 1s, 2, and 3, I would rather know and get ready and get out there on the runway so I can get prepared instead of, having an incident that's called in that's already happened.
So anticipate versus react.
Absolutely, because I can get staged.
Okay.
I can get my gear, my equipment ready, and we can start getting information. Kind of aircraft, fuel on board, number of souls on board. Okay, what's the nature of the emergency? And if I'm there and I'm ready to go, it is way ahead of the curve than getting a call in the middle of the night, and then from the airport saying, "Hey, we've got an aircraft down," because I've got 5-minute response time from that, and that's the national average. Is after an incident on airport, you're looking at about 5 minutes for us to get out there and get ready to go. So yeah, I'd rather go alert 1, 2, 3, and get out there on the ramp.
Do you have a crash button or a hotline that you just pick up, or you have to go through 911?
We have a crash phone in the tower, and we pick it up, and it automatically rings direct to the ARF guys, and it I don't know if it blows up their stuff, but it's a really loud tone.
Right.
And they pretty much answer really quick. And, fire stations, hey, I got an alert 1, some 210 with an alternator failure, is coming in, and we don't know what else is wrong with them.
One time I had an alternator up. The euphemism ATC used was, "Do you need us to roll equipment?"
Yeah, and he said the same thing to me. Oh, no, he didn't. No, actually, he didn't ask me. I just said it's not an emergency, and then I hear him saying, "Let's roll equipment." He was talking to somebody, and I could hear him say that. I was like, "No, I'm going to get in trouble," but I wasn't, and which brings me up my next question. If if I'm quick to, as a pilot, to announce an emergency that's equivalent to an alert 1, and you're going to stage and get ready your trucks and everything else, and it ends up not being a big deal at all, it's a non-event. I mean, do you guys get kind of put out? In other words, I don't want to, I think as pilots, we're a little bit intimidated to call that emergency and to have you guys stage and everything because, oh man, they're pissed that we didn't, actually run off the runway. I mean, I don't know. It's stupid, but these are real, I think, real thoughts pilots have.
No, absolutely not. I would rather be out there and have a non-event all day long. Where I would get a little bit put out is if there's a known emergency or there's some reason that we should have actually rolled and it didn't happen. That's what puts you out.
Okay,
As
so
pilots, the ATC phraseology was perfect to de-escalate the situation. Do you need to roll equipment versus do you need ambulance and fire truck? And the same thing is somewhat similar to say, now you've reached the mindset you have an emergency. That's a step up in escalation of heart rate and everything else versus, no, I don't. I can handle this, which is bad, but that's out there.
yeah, and so as pilots, I think we need to understand Larry's point of view is they would much rather roll the equipment than not. So it's okay. It's almost like I want to say to the pilots out there, hey guys, it's okay. When you need it, it's there. And if you even think you need it, it's there. And it's always better. So you have permission. And that's I think, the message I want to get out there.
I like to say, do you require assistance?
Yes.
That's a real low tone.
De-escalator.
Yeah, and maybe they're just like, yeah, I just got turned around and I'm going to land at Navy instead of Meacham. And I'm like, okay, turn left 30 degrees. You see that? See okay. Stuff, very low tone phrases. And maybe it's just something simple. Or they're like, well, maybe I got a brake failure. Oh, okay. Hey, ARF.
Okay, well, that's a good story, too. Although I don't want to necessarily get into the emergency stories, but you had a pilot in a Cherokee who was on approach to you guys, and she knew that she didn't have brakes. So walk me through not just the emergency, but the aftermath.
So she didn't declare. She just came across and told us what was a problem. We went ahead and declared for her.
You declared for her.
ATC declared for her. So pilot, ATC, and generally those responsible for the aircraft can declare. So say you have a maintainer that's working on the fuel tank and you just, there's a leak and now you have a lot of fuel on the ground. They can call ARF as well and say, hey, I got a fuel spill and I need help. And they'll go out there and so that day we did declare for her. She came in, I treated it as if she had complete brake failure. She said she had a little bit of pressure on one side, and I'm like, well, that's not gonna help you. So, I told her just treat it like a soft field or a short field landing, and then if you need to just do some very small S-turns on the runway to slow your speed down, and she ended up rolling about 6,000 feet down the runway, and she rolled right off past the hold short line, and I'm like, perfect. And then the ARF guys came up. She didn't want to taxi to the FBO, which I understood. No, just pull the mixture power off, get out. You're good. The ARF truck was there. The ops guys were there, and they had same thing. A couple questions. Are you okay? They had to write, make their report, and we had already made ours. We already got all the facts, and then they towed her back, and have a nice day.
So when you declare an emergency, do you announce that on the radio frequency?
We're not required to. I think I did that day. I said, we're just going to go ahead and treat it as such, and we'll get the assistance and stuff there for you. So, but I didn't want to just she had broke down a little bit, and I didn't want to keep escalating that.
It.
Right.
Exactly.
So I was just
asking.
Right. So I kind of said it at first, and then I was like, all right, let's de-escalate this. You got this. You're good. Just fly it in like always.
Is that the situation where you hit the crash phone?
Right. Yeah. Well, I didn't hit it because I was working tower that day. But the ground controller, as soon as we heard this was going on, he picked up the crash phone, ARF station.
As the tower controller, you're telling the ground controller, let's do this? Or the ground controller decided?
Though the ground controller wasn't monitoring me at the time, he was doing other things. I had a CIC behind me watching as well. And even then, even if there wasn't
CIC, that's what
controller in charge. So a third person watching everything going on. So he heard everything going on. I didn't have to say anything that day, but normally I'd have said, hey, ground, I got this coming in, alert 2, let's go. And I give them the type of airplane, all the stuff, nature of difficulty, call sign, all that stuff. And they ring the phone, the ARF guys pick up, hey, we just went straight to alert 2 that day.
Alert 2?
Yeah, no brakes.
Yeah.
That's an alert 2 to me. So he just rang it as an alert 2. They got out there real quick. They staged, and luckily everything was great. She walked away just fine. She was a little shaken up, but
Well, I mean, we talk about like what sets the pilots at ease, and everything else. I will tell you that in my situation with the low voltage enunciator, when the controller came over the line and said 20 Yankee, when able, say souls aboard and fuel remaining, it's like that's kind of when it. Oh my gosh, why are you saying that? But why do you guys need to know souls aboard and fuel remaining?
Well, from a tactical standpoint and planning standpoint, you've got to get the number of resources there to cover the
ambulances and
right. I'm in the what if game, and so I play the what if worst case scenario. So if I've got 6 people on board, I'm rolling enough equipment to take care of 6 people, medical triage, ambulances, fuel. Okay, if you've got 500 gallons of Jet A, okay, I know I'm going with AFFF foam.
oh,
Okay.
right.
So the more information I have, the more resources I can bring to the table in a hurry.
That's a good point.
but the aftermath should not scare pilots to not declare.
Right, and I think that there is absolutely a hesitation because of the fear of the emergency aftermath. So so hopefully we dispelled that myth. So at uncontrolled towers, you have an issue, you need to call the airport manager. And that's going to be listed in the airport facilities directory.
Or your ARTC, whoever's
Can get
controlling
that.
that area has contact numbers.
Okay, and I guess as pilots, you shouldn't be like stressing about all that kind of stuff. Just get yourself down safely. If you have to
Right.
block the runway, block the runway. The important thing is
Consider what happens afterwards, and how do you get that aircraft off the runway?
what do you mean?
So there's no mechanic on the field. I'm a long ways from any mechanic, and I have an airplane with a flat tire that can't be moved. How do you get that moved? So, unfortunately, the take home for me was, thank God I have a good relationship with Van Bortle and the people that do this particular plane, because Daryl Taylor fixed me up. I mean, he sent me out with a jack. He sent me out with all the torque instruments. I got a video, single pictures of each step to take and how to change that tire, and he sent me with a tire.
So you went back like the next day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I took a mechanic, because I've never changed a tire, I took a mechanic with me. And it was very fortunate because even though they gave me one jack, if you jack up one side, the tail tends to strike. So one of the mechanics ended up just using his back to hold the plane up. We changed the tire.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, very cool. I think that there's a lot to take away here, and especially for pilots, and understanding what's going on behind the scenes, and at both uncontrolled and controlled. So, Ernie, thanks so much for bringing this issue to us, and Matt, thanks for your input. Larry, I appreciate it.
And I would encourage pilots, GA guys, if you have a fire station that's dedicated to your airport, drop by, have a cup of coffee with them. You're going to find out a lot of the guys that are in these stations are also pilots.
Oh, wow. You're a pilot?
And it's a funny story. I was right prior to 9/11. I was probably 12, 15 hours in instruction, and of course 9/11 hit. They shut down general aviation. So I never went back to it because I was raising a family at the time, and the cost went up considerably after that. But I do encourage pilots to go into those fire stations,
That's a
grab a
great
cup of
idea.
coffee, and talk to these guys. Hey, we're just guys like you. And we'd rather have 1,000 non-events than one successful event.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think maybe what we do is do a taking off episode where we take the cameras down to the ARF and meet the guys at Meacham or something like that.
Oh yeah, they would be definitely down for that.
Yeah, okay.
That was cool.
Very good. So, pilots out there, don't be afraid to declare that emergency, and don't worry about, the aftermath, other than, you got to know how to call the facilities if you're at an uncontrolled. If you're at a controlled, they tend to help you and take care of that. So be safe out there, and we'll see you guys next time in the hangar.